Audio on demand from Vision Christian Media.
Coming up today on The Story.
She wrote me a letter and all her friends prayed over the letter and she sent it to me and just basically told me her story because I hadn't heard from her for about a year. And so I looked at this letter and I thought, wow, it seems like her life has been turned around, but it's a shame she's some crazy Christian. And she said, I want you to come and see me when you come up to Brisbane. I wanted to see if what she said was true. I thought someone couldn't turn their life around like that.
The Story.
G'day, I'm Jimmy Colfax. Welcome to The Story. Well, when Cindy McGarvie received an invitation to a barbecue from a former colleague in the Australian Army Nursing Corps, she didn't really know what to expect. This girlfriend had been discharged for poor choices, and now Cindy wanted to know if she had really changed. Little did she know at the time, but that invitation to a barbecue would radically change the direction of her life. We'll find out how as Cindy shares her story with us today. Cindy is chatting with Karen Hunt.
Where were you born and raised, Cindy? And maybe just share a little bit of your early life and perhaps a special childhood memory to kick us off.
Yeah, well, I was raised in the Macleay Valley on a farm. There were various farms. The first one was dairying. That was up north of the Macleay in an area called Nulla Creek, and that is actually the area of Slim Dusty where he was born and raised. So the Slim Dusty house was just down the road from there.
So country, western, music in the family?
Yes, my father was a musician. He sang a lot of the Slim Dusty songs and he wrote his own songs. So we basically grew up going out every weekend to family functions or barbecues within the community where my father would take his guitar and sing.
What about the kids?
Some of us are musicians. I could sing a bit but didn't pursue that.
That's okay. We're all unique. So how many kids in your family?
6. We were a big Catholic family, so 6 kids.
And where do you come in that birth order?
Yeah, I come third, the middle mixed-up child.
The middle mixed-up one. Oh, interesting. You said dairy farming was a key part of your world?
Yeah, the first years were dairy farming, but it's always been beef, cattle and horses. You know, my father had 20 horses.
Wow.
So, he broke horses in and he, trained stock horses and also rodeos. He was a bronc rider in the day, and my brothers were bull riders, so it was that whole rodeo scene as well, camp drafting, all that sort of thing.
So how many girls in the family?
Well, there were 4 girls and 2 boys.
So did you ever think maybe one day you'd get into equestrian sport?
Not really. I mean, I used to ride, but I do actually secretly.
Oh, yes. Tell me more.
I follow on Instagram.
What?
I follow just different horse.
No. Do you?
I know. It's crazy. And
Different
I
horse
love it.
What? Describe this.
All the different types of horse breeds, especially the great horses, the really big ones. It just does something for me. I don't know. I see the power in those really big horses in Eastern Europe. I don't know what they're called. Big draft horses and that. They pull the carriages and did all the hard work and all that sort of thing. That fascinates me. I love racehorses as well. They just have so much power. Yeah, I just really am fascinated by it.
So as a girl, what was your passion? What did you love? What were you good at as a child?
Well, I was always very sporty and I love sport. So I played all sorts of sport. I played field hockey and I played netball and I played basketball. And I would play mixed men's basketball, so I'd also play in a mixed team with men. The rougher I really enjoyed that. Yeah, so I really enjoyed the outdoors. I was a tomboy. I was always
competitive.
Very competitive. Yeah, very competitive.
With that many brothers, I imagine too, on a farm.
Yeah. So I have an older sister who's only 16 months older than me, and we were like chalk and cheese. I also liked playing cowboys and Indians with my brothers and all that sort of thing. So I was always dirty and, getting in the dirt.
Didn't
and all that.
mind getting a bit grubby.
Yeah, and my mother, it was really frustrating to her because I was always just dirty, and I would describe it as feral because I never cared about my hair or how I looked or anything like that. Yeah, I have a distinct memory when I was about maybe 11 or 12. I looked in the mirror one morning before I went to school and I thought, I should do my hair.
Maybe.
It was the very first time you come to that realization of yourself. I distinctly remember it. I think, I wonder why
Puberty
I've
was
never
kicking
thought.
in.
Yeah,
and-
yeah.
So I guess at that age, Cindy, you're kind of at a point in your development of wondering, who am I? I'm starting to blossom and develop. Where did I come from? How did you experience that season in your life?
Yeah, I remember even before that, I remember walking around school. Maybe I was probably about 8 or 9. And I remember feeling really lonely. And I can remember thinking, who am I? Why am I here? Where did I come from? You know, I was always asking those sort of questions. It's funny, as a child, you don't think to ask things, and you probably presume everyone else thinks the same thing.
I tend to agree with that. Growing up for me, maturing, young adulthood, I guess I had to learn to be curious and to ask questions.
Yeah.
If there's something you want to know about, you have to ask. You have to search. You have to research to find answers that maybe you don't even realise what path it's going to take you down. So let's go into high school years. So high school for you was in the same area or?
Yeah, it was in the same area. I went to a Catholic high school. It was really interesting carrying on from those questions. I can remember one time we went to science class, and maybe I was in year 7 or 8, and we went to science class, and the science teacher told us that we evolved from monkeys. We learned it in the textbooks, and we learned to understand that anything in the textbook is true and right and fact. And I was horrified. And again, I didn't say anything to anyone. After that class, I felt like something in me had died. And I can remember walking around school, again, just feeling so down, like some little fire had been snuffed out, and just thought, so we just came from monkeys, and, you know, what's my purpose in life? I'm just going to live and die. And I guess that had a big impact on me. And again, I didn't say anything to anyone.
So when you left high school, what did you embark upon?
So when I left high school, I ended up joining the army. I ended up in nursing corps. And I trained in nursing, and I then trained in the operating theatre. And when I finished my last year or so, I was an instructor. When I joined the army, I was one of the last groups, the Women's Corps, to train in Sydney. So we went down to Sydney and we signed up. There was a whole bunch of girls, and then we were put on a bus and sent off to the training place. And the location escapes me just at the moment. I mean, I wrote a little bit about this in my book, Lost Boys, but we were like, wow, we've joined the army and we're serving our country and we're doing something good, and this is just going to be so exciting. I had no idea, such naivety. So when we got off the bus, when we arrived and we got off the bus, and there were some corporals there, and they just started yelling at us to get off the bus, line up, all of that sort of
You're
stuff.
in the army now, woman.
Like, what?
Oh, dear.
What is going on? And you were just like, what has happened? We never knew this was going to happen. Yeah, so from there, they lined us up, and we had to march everywhere, and we didn't know how to march at first, of course. And, you know, they'd march us here to get our uniform and march us there to do something else. And as we were marching around, you know, they'd say, halt. And then we'd all stop and we'd all run up the back of each other and all that sort of thing. And I just thought this was hilarious. So I would be laughing my head off.
Oh, dear. That would not go down well, I imagine.
I was continually called out for my laughing. And, you know, what are you laughing at? And, you know, I was called out as an example of someone who couldn't control themselves.
How did they deal with that? What did they do?
Oh, just being screamed at and yelled at is a really hard thing to deal with, especially, I think, as a girl. Anyone, but as a girl, and having men scream at you like that, you know, it toughens you up to have to realise you have to depersonalise it, because that's what they have to do. So it took a while. Some girls would cry all the time and things like that. It was really tough.
You're listening to The Story. Today, Karen Hunt is having a chat with Cindy McGarvie, who's sharing her life journey with us. We just heard a bit of her background and about some of her experiences in the army. Next, we'll find out about how she met her husband and about that invitation to a barbecue that radically changed the direction of her life. All that and more is coming up when we return.
The Story. If this program has highlighted something you'd like prayer for, we'd love to pray for you. Call 1-800-PRAY-FOR-ME. That's 1-800-772-936. It's a free call. Or text 0401 132 888.
Hi, I'm Jimmy Colfax and this is The Story. We're continuing with Karen Hunt chatting with Cindy McGarvie, who's sharing her life journey with us. Before the break, we heard a bit of her background and about some of her experiences in the army. Now, we're going to hear what happened next in Cindy's life.
You told me you met your husband in the army.
I did.
How did that come about?
Well, I got posted to Canungra. That was a land warfare centre, and that's where I met my husband there. And
What was his role?
He was combat engineer.
So he wasn't yelling at you, telling you what to do?
No, he wasn't yelling at me. Actually, he was often in the group that would train us or help do the training when we would go out bush. So if they would take a team out bush or something like that, there'd be a group who'd have to act as either the enemy, and come and ambush us and things like that, or they would act as instructors if we were being trained in weapons or something like that. Actually, the first training that he was in was weapon training, and we had to strip and assemble. In those days, they were SLR rifles. He was the instructor, and I thought, this guy's a really nice guy. Yeah, so you just pretend, what girls do? They pretend, can you just help me with this? Can you just, I can't do this. Can you just come and help me?
Meanwhile, the crush is growing.
Yeah. So girls are experts at that. They know exactly what they're doing.
How did things eventuate to get together?
Oh, wow. It took a long time to eventually, start dating, and I felt like I fell for him really hard, but he didn't see that at first.
So what did you like about him?
I was actually really good friends with one of his mates, and his mate was very outgoing, and Rod, my husband, was his roommate. And this is what I thought about him. He is a really nice guy. He's very quiet, very deep, and quiet. And I'd always think, I had a lot of respect for him, although he was quite handsome. It wasn't that. It was his deep thinking and his depth I really admired first and respected first. And then it grew from there.
His strength was attractive. Was he a Christian at the time?
No, he wasn't. He didn't grow up in a Christian home.
Were you a Christian at the time?
I wasn't a Christian at the time, as in following my faith in God. But once we had worked out that we were the one, he was the one for me.
For each other,
yes.
Yep.
He was a bit slow on that. I guess we were engaged to be married, and I became a Christian. I was converted. I had a friend who was also in the army, and she had a drinking problem, and it got worse in the army, and she ended up getting discharged because it was so bad. And so she went to, have you heard of Alcoholics Victorious?
No, I haven't.
It's like a Christian version of Alcoholics Anonymous.
Mm-hmm.
So some really good, strong men who were leading that in Brisbane, they helped her in her darkest hours with alcoholism. And through that, they led her to Christ. And, she started going to church. She cleaned her life up. She went on to study nursing and stuff. So she said, I've got this friend who's in the army. And she thought I was a good girl, but I was keeping up appearances. But she thought of me. She wrote me a letter, and all her friends prayed over the letter, and she sent it to me and just basically told me her story, because I hadn't heard from her for about a year. And so I looked at this letter and I thought, wow, it seems like her life has been turned around, but it's a shame she's some crazy Christian. My husband, we were engaged at the time. I said, I remember so-and-so, this has happened. And he couldn't believe it as well. And she said, I want you to come and see me when you come up to Brisbane. I was getting posted there. So when I did, she said, I want you to come, I'll pick you up and I'll take you to a barbecue. I wanted to see if what she said was true.
Right.
I thought someone couldn't turn their life around like that. So I went, and it was an Alcoholics Victorious barbecue. I wanted to look at her. I wanted to see if she was cleaned up. I remember the last time I saw her, she was in a really bad way. So I was thinking, she looks sober. She looks cleaned up. She looks like in a full mind.
Is this real?
Yeah, and I didn't really care so much about seeing the other people there. I was just going to see her. The first person I saw when I came into the barbecue was someone who had prayed over that letter and had been praying for me for a while, and his name was Duncan. And I didn't know where I was or anything like that. And I said, when I learned his name, I said, I'll have to have a beer with you sometime.
Of course. You grew up in that country in Western Town. I remember.
I didn't even drink beer, but that's what you say to someone when you meet a Duncan. Well, especially if you...
From that era.
Yeah. And he just sort of laughed. And so what happened was I questioned her and just examined what I saw. And then afterwards, people sat around and some talked about how they'd been delivered from drugs. Duncan spoke about, how he'd been delivered from alcoholism. And other people spoke. And when I heard Duncan's testimony, I guess, I thought, oh my goodness, what have I just said to this guy and where am I?
It would hit you. You'd wonder.
Yeah, but I was really impacted by hearing their story. So I went over to Duncan after that and I just said, well, I guess I won't have that beer with you after all. And he just sort of laughed. And then he said, can I pray for you? And I thought, what is that? But I didn't want to offend him anymore because I thought, I'd be offended if someone come and said that to me. So I said, yeah, okay. And so I can remember sitting on a stool and he was standing over me praying for me. He just wept and his tears fell on my head. And I was like, I couldn't comprehend it. Why would someone cry over me? But also I felt how much he really cared for me and how genuine he was. And that really made a big impact on me. And I had no idea that he'd been praying for me for a long while. The next day they took me to church. I thought, I want this. I was so impacted by people around me. And I thought, I've never seen people happy to be in church. I wanted that peace. I was searching for peace. I wanted that purpose. Obviously, since I was a little girl, I wanted to know who made me or was I made or all of those things. And I found the answers there. That's how I was converted.
That was Karen Hunt chatting with Cindy McGarvie, who's sharing with us a bit of her life journey and how she became a Christian. Next time, we'll hear how she goes on to become a missionary in Africa and was involved with Bible translation among marginalised people groups. Also, she was appointed CEO of Youth for Christ Australia in June 2015 and has written 3 Christian books. We'll find out how all that comes about as Cindy shares more of her story next time. Meanwhile, to find out more about Youth for Christ and Cindy's books, that information is found at their website. It's simply yfc.org.au. Once again, that's yfc.org.au. Finally, we'll end with a Bible verse that really reflects Cindy's story. It's from Jeremiah chapter 9, verse 11, which says, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future." And we'll hear about the incredible things that happened in Cindy McGarvie's future as we hear more of her story next time. Until then, I'm Jimmy Colfax, encouraging you to share your story with someone today.
Next time on The Story.
When I was young, I was always interested in other people and other cultures. I had such a curious streak. And when I became Christian and was converted, I used to listen very intently to all the missionaries that would come to the church and talk about working in other cultures. And I remember there was one time that someone said, if anyone really feels that God is calling them to mission work, come up the front and we'll pray for you. And I was one of those people.
When Cindy McGarvie went to a barbecue that she was invited to by an old army friend, she had no idea it would radically change the direction of her life. She became a Christian and then went on to become a missionary in Africa and is now the CEO of Youth for Christ Australia. We'll hear how it all came about as Cindy shares more of her story next time.
The Story. Just another way Vision is helping you look to God daily.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.